What I took away from this was not the cameras and all of that. It was the gaslighting, the manipulation, Christof's narcissism, the lack of choice, the lack of consent. That is what left me feeling cold about this film.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, you know matters. You know it's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit.
I'm Emily Guy Birkin, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit. Because pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1998 film, The Truman Show, with my sister, Tracy Guy Decker, and with you. Let's dive in. Okay, Trace, I didn't know until yesterday whether or not you'd seen this film because it came out after we'd both kind of left the nest. But tell me what you remember, what you know about this movie.
Yeah, I definitely have seen it. I have a number of Polaroids, vignettes in my head about this film. I remember good morning, and if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I remember clearly that Truman's the wedding photo, his wife is crossing her fingers behind her back or something, because all the people, he's the only one who's not an actor, and him sort of figuring that out and kind of being released from that. And I very clearly remember a moment where his best friend, he's not where they think he is, and he looks straight into the camera and is I don't know what to do, and breaks the illusion. And everybody's mad at him, or the people in charge are mad at him. I remember that a girlfriend or a would-be girlfriend is wearing a button that says, "How will it end?" which is actually about him, but he doesn't realize it. That his dad supposedly died because the actor stopped wanting to play along, and then he sees him on the street or something as an extra. I remember it being both amusing and deeply, deeply disturbing. That's sort of the flavor that's in my brain about the Truman Show. Tell me, why are we talking about it today?
I'm not sure. I can't remember what reminded me of it recently, but I wanted to revisit this film that I saw in the theater, I think twice when it came out, and then saw a couple more times after that. And I remember really liking it, finding it very thought-provoking. And then I hadn't really thought about it again until the last 5 or 10 years. One of my interests is I find the stories of people who've escaped high-control religions to be very interesting. And I learned that apostates who have, escaped these evangelical or other high-control religions see themselves in the Truman Show. And that I found fascinating and had not occurred to me. But as soon as I heard that, I was like, of course they do. And so I wanted to rewatch it with that in mind. And so that was, why it was on the list. So I'm not sure why, specifically this week. So that's why, I wanted to rewatch it. And seeing it again for the first time, probably in about 15, 20 years, boy, was it even more disturbing than it was when I saw it as a 19-year-old in the theater. I certainly got disturbing aspects of it at the time, and it was heartbreaking. But this time around, I was much more horrified and a lot less charmed than I was seeing it the first time. And I also was a lot less convinced by the arguments. There were a lot of people who were saying oh my goodness, Andrew Niccol, who wrote it, and Peter Weir, who was the director, were prescient because, they saw the rise of reality TV. And I remember seeing that in the years afterwards, oh, that's, they saw Survivor and Big Brother coming, and, yeah, okay, I see that. And now I'm yeah, that misses the point. I don't really feel like that is the point of what this story is about and what it really gets to, that is the human condition that doesn't rely on the constant surveillance aspect of it, because I think what's important about this is the gaslighting and the abuse and the narcissism, which is what's important, that doesn't need the kind of surveillance and cameras, the specific reality television aspect of it. That's what's going on in my head about this. And then the religious allegories within this, I think, are really fascinating and really interesting, that are just so high concept that I know I did not entirely catch as a teenager seeing this. So that's kind of just high level where I'm going. So let me give you, since you only kind of remember those little details, I'm going to do high level, as much as I can, synopsis of the plot. So the Truman Show, it's starring Jim Carrey as Truman Burbank. It is a completely immersive reality television show. Jim Carrey is Truman Burbank. He was the first child to be adopted by a corporation. He was one of 5 unwanted pregnancies, and he became the child star because he was born first. And so he was adopted by the corporation. The showrunner and director and mastermind behind this is Christof, played by Ed Harris. They have built a huge dome behind the Hollywood Hills in Burbank, which is where Truman's last name comes from. In that dome, they have created this island town called Sea Haven, which is it's a planned community in Florida. And the actual house that Truman lives in was Matt Gates's house. So he's the really awful senator with the huge forehead who...
the
Yes.
inappropriate things.
That guy.
Yeah. Okay.
It was a real planned community, so it looks the part of the type of place that they would make.
So that's
That
not a
is
soundstage?
Yeah.
Weird.
And so they have scripted his entire life. So Christof says, it's all real because Truman is real. Yes, everyone around him are actors, but everything he does is real. He doesn't know that this is a creation. They cast a woman to play his mother. They cast a man to play his father. And they then allow him to do whatever. At the beginning of the film, we are on day 10,900 and something. So it's been about 30 years. And Truman is married to Meryl, who is played by Laura Linney. Now, Meryl is her character's name. The actress is named Hannah Gill. And this is something I remember that really bothered me as a 19-year-old, because she's an actress who actually has sex with Truman. And it's very clear that Hannah Gill, the actress, cannot stand Truman, the person. And props to Laura Linney for making that clear. She conveys how much she doesn't like him. So we get to see, we mostly follow Truman through the film, but we do sometimes see views with Christof, behind the scenes with the main actors. So with Angela is the name of his mother in the show. I don't know if we find out what the actress's name is. She's played by Holland Taylor. Kirk is the name of his father. I cannot remember what the actor's name is, and I don't know what his name is off the show. Marlon is his best friend, who he was cast at age 7 to be his best friend and has grown up with him. And he's played by Noah Emmerich. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about this film is that all of the characters, the main characters in the show, have classic Hollywood names. So Marlon Brando, Meryl Streep, Kirk Douglas, Angela Lansbury. And then the names of the streets are classic Hollywood names. So Lancaster, I can't remember them, but they're all nods to old Hollywood.
Actors' last names.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we see some behind the scenes stuff and hear Christof talking about we did have to put some things in place to keep Truman here. So we see that when he was a child in school, he said, I want to be an explorer when I grow up. And his teacher pulls a map down and says, you're too late. Everything's already been discovered. And there's a point where his mom is looking at old photographs with him and like, oh, here's when we went on vacation to see Mount Rushmore. And he's like, it looks small. And she's because it's clearly a soundstage. And she's like, oh, and you slept and slept on that trip. So like they never actually left the soundstage. They just had him take a nap and said like, oh, you slept all the way.
They tricked him.
Yeah. They had him become an insurance salesman, and they are talking about how dangerous flying is. And when he was 7 years old, they wrote into the show that he went sailing with his father, and because of this dome that they have, they can control the weather. They made a storm, and he insisted on staying out in the storm, and his father drowned, which he feels is his fault.
So it's not just that his dad was dead that I remember, but that he actually
feels personally responsible for it and has a phobia of the water to keep him there on this Sea Haven Island.
On this island.
And when he was like around high school or college age, they cast Meryl to be his girlfriend, then wife, but he sees and like is like immediately infatuated with an extra played by Natasha McElhone. Her name on the show is Lauren, but her actual name is Sylvia. And he keeps like running into her. And she has that pin. How will it end?
Yeah.
And one night
they sent her to Fiji or something?
One night he manages to like evade cameras because she knows where they are and go to the beach, and they kiss, and they send another extra claiming to be her father, telling him she has schizophrenia. She does this with all of her boyfriends. And she's like saying, no, he's lying. You're on TV. And the father says, we're moving to Fiji. You'll never see her again. So from that point on, he's obsessed with Fiji. So when we meet him at the beginning, we see like him go through a normal day. Like he like talks to himself in the mirror. There's a camera in the mirror in his bathroom. He says hello to his neighbors and he says, good morning. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Right.
All of that. But as he's getting into his car to drive to work, a light falls from the sky. He goes and looks at it and he's really like, what the heck? But then as he's driving, Classical Clive, the DJ on the radio he listens to, explains it away as a plane flying overhead was in trouble and started spewing parts. And, that's why you shouldn't fly because it's so dangerous. We see him go through basically a normal day. He has this boring job. He's clearly dissatisfied in it. People like come up to him and like push him against a wall where there's a billboard because it's product placement. That's how the show is paid for. In the evening, he goes and hangs out with Marlon. He ends up sitting on the beach, just kind of looking out over the water, and it starts to rain, but it's just raining over him because Christof wants him to go home because they want him to have a baby with Meryl. So it's just raining over him. So he doesn't realize at first. He just walks out and he's like, wait a minute, the water's just over me. And then the water moves, so it's just over him again. And then he starts like walking around with it, and then it starts raining everywhere. So strange things start to happen as he starts being spontaneous. Because as with any like film sets, you don't fill out everything. You don't have the money to fill out everything. So he starts doing things outside of the ordinary to kind of test stuff because he's like, something weird is going on. So he goes into a building he doesn't normally go into, and he tries to get into the elevator. And it's not actually an elevator. It's an entrance to like a green room, and there's like catering. And so like they have to push him out of there. And like he doesn't understand what's going on. So then he like smacks a guy who's like pretending to be like clearing gutters or something like that and runs away. And like all these extras are terrible improvisers because they just let him. And it's kind of like when a superhero starts testing their powers. Like he starts trying to figure it out. So he's like, all right, I'm going to go to Fiji. There's a travel agent, but all the posters in the travel agency are like, are you sure you want to fly? It's really dangerous. And because they didn't expect him to go to the travel agency, they have to like very quickly send an actress in, and she's still wearing the bib from the makeup when she comes in, and she has to pull it off quickly. And so she's like, I'm sorry, there are no flights for another month. And he's like, all right, I'll find another way. So he tries to take a train and it's just left, and he tries to take a bus. And he just manages to get on the bus, and the bus driver like grinds the gears until the bus breaks, because that's what he's been told to do. And everyone gets off the bus because there's a bunch of extras on the bus, including a little girl who like turns around and is like, is that him? And so everyone piles off the bus. Nobody's upset. And the bus driver is clearly upset. And he's like, I'm really sorry, son. So Truman ends up having a fight with Meryl where she's like, all right, you want to go to Fiji? Go to Fiji. Save up for a few months and then you can go. At that point, they're in his car. He's waiting in the car when she gets home from work. She's theoretically a nurse and she rides her bike to work. He's like, okay, you're okay with that? Let's go now. And so he like pulls out of the driveway and starts driving like really, really fast. She's like not okay with this because this is not the job she signed up for. She's like freaking out. And then a bunch of cars show up and like block his way. And she's like, hey, let's just go home. He's like, all right. And then he backs up and goes the other direction, but then skips their turnoff and then goes the other way. And there's a bridge off of their island. And like, he's afraid of the water. And so he's like, he rushes over the bridge, has her like take the wheel, and he closes his eyes because he's scared of the water. And like, they get over the bridge and then there's like fire that, again, this is Christof clearly doing this. They get to a place where apparently there's a nuclear power plant that's having a meltdown and they have to turn around. And there's police officers who are like, I'm sorry, you can't come through. There's a nuclear meltdown. And the police officer calls him Truman. And he is like, this is what? And he gets out of the car and like runs away into the forest and is like tackled by several men in the like radioactive suit and the police officer, and they take him home. At which point he and Meryl have like another argument where he's like, why do you want to have a baby with me when you don't even like me? And yeah,
I remember that line.
And she says, why don't I make you a nice cup of Makoko? And she does a product placement thing. And he's like, who are you talking to? She is like, gets scared of him. And she had recently had a product placement of a kitchen utensil that has like it's like a knife thing. And she like takes it and is like holding it towards him because she's scared. And he takes it from her and ends up like, he's not actually going to hurt her, and she like looks up and goes, do something to like the Christof producers. At which point Marlon shows up and she's like, I can't go on like this. It's unprofessional. Marlon comforts her and then takes Truman away. And Truman's like, I feel like everyone's in on it. And Marlon says to him, well, if everyone were in on it, then I would be in on it too. We've been best friends since we were 7 years old. The only way we got through school was copying each other's work. And like, I would never lie to you. And then you go through and you see that Christof is feeding him lines. Well, meanwhile, Marlon is like tearing up. And it is like, it's just a punch to the gut. Because the one relationship that feels real to Truman isn't. So we intersperse with shots of people watching the show. People are kind of cheering Truman on. They kind of want him to figure it out. We also see Christof and his assistant directors working, and there's a interview with Christof. So Marlon says, and I missed one point. There was Truman sees his father on the street dressed as a homeless man and recognizes him, and everyone is telling him he's crazy, and the whole people spirit Kirk right off the set. And so Marlon's like, I found him, and there's this emotional reunion. And so Christof in this interview is saying well, since he started it, we're going to fix this. He was saying that Kirk was disgruntled and came back on. He was not happy about being written off the show. So, but we're going to fix this. And the interviewer's like, so how are you going to explain the 22-year absence? And he's like, amnesia. The interviewer's like, oh, brilliant. Even though that's so stupid. And they have some people call in to ask questions like an interview show. One of them is Sylvia saying what you're doing to Truman is sick. And Christof says you batted your eyelashes at him and thought you had a moment with him. But what really bothers you is that he could leave anytime he wants. He doesn't appear to want to. He also says Meryl is going to be leaving the show. There will be a new love interest. So after all of that happens, we see Truman goes home, goes to sleep, and we see Christof has this enormous screen in his room, and he goes and kind of pets Truman's face before he goes to bed. So he clearly has this affection for him. So the next day, Truman is back to what appears to be normal. He is in his bathroom mirror and drawing with soap, drawing a helmet like he's an astronaut. He says to his neighbors his catchphrase and if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Goes through his normal day. Everything seems to be back to normal. They introduce who is clearly going to be the new love interest, and he kind of shyly smiles at her and stuff like that. And in the evening, his assistant directors are just kind of keeping an eye on him. He is in the basement, which is where he has been staying since Meryl left. Christof comes in and is like, what's going on? Where is he? And he's like, oh, he fell asleep in the basement here. And he's like, something's wrong. Put on the audio. He's snoring. It's fine. He's sleeping. It's not a big deal. And so he's like, send Marlon over. So Marlon comes over, comes down to the basement. He's not actually there. He's piled something up and put an audio on. He's like, well, he's got to be there. We would have seen him go up the stairs. And they find that he has dug a hole from the lawn down into the basement and escaped that way. And no one realized because they didn't think that he could get out any way other than the stairs. When they find him, he has a boat that he is sailing away. And so they start, because they control the weather, they start sending storms to him. The assistant directors are like, he's afraid of the water. He doesn't know how to swim. He's going to drown. And Christof is like, no, make it worse. Make it worse. And at one point, Truman shouts up at the sky, is that the best you can do? You're going to have to kill me. And nearly capsizes the boat until finally Christof says, all right, that's enough, and stops. And so the weather improves. The boat is fine, and Truman is just kind of enjoying sailing. The boat suddenly hits something, and it's the dome, because it's not really the sea. It's this amazing, weird moment where Truman touches the sky. And then he starts walking along until he comes to these stairs with a door. It's marked exit. And he goes to it, and then Christof speaks to him, which startles Truman, of course. Truman says, who are you? Christof says, I am the creator of a television show. And Truman says, well, then who am I? He's like, you're the star. And Christof tries to convince him to stay and says, there are lies out there too. In here you're safe. You can't leave. And Truman just kind of stares like up at the sky for a while. And he says, well, say something. Christof says, well, say something, God damn it. You're on live television, to the entire world. And that's when Truman says, and if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And he takes a bow and he goes out the door. And we see everyone who's been watching it go like just so excited, so excited, so excited. And then one person says, what else is on? And change the channel. So I remember laughing when I saw it in 1998, and I did not laugh this time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with something little. The attention to detail in this film. It's not little. It's enormous. It's amazing, the attention to detail they put into this film. But it's not like a big part of my analysis. So there are things that they thought about and put into that I just think are amazing. So, for instance, this is a dome. There is no real sunlight. Truman would not get any actual vitamin D. And so they've thought of that. And you see in one scene, he has a bottle of vitamin D pills by his breakfast. So there are moments like that they have thought of. That kind of attention to detail is amazing. So Peter Weir and Andrew Niccol thought through the implications of what this would be and included it in the film. They have given us all of these details of what it would be like to enclose someone in a space like this. The fact that the music that he listens to is classical Clive, it's classical music because that's in the public domain. So that is partially because that's money saving, but then it also helps them control the narrative as well, because if they were to allow him to listen to contemporary music with contemporary lyrics, that could give him more opportunities to question things. So all of these kinds of attention to detail is just amazing. It's when he stops by the newsstand every day and picks up a newspaper and a magazine. The magazines that are there are all things that are hobbies that don't require travel. So there's Dog Fancier, there's parenting magazines, there's fashion magazines. All of this stuff is just really impressive. There's also there's a street cleaner who has one of those grabby things to pick things up off the street. He's not actually picking anything up because he's an actor. He's not actually a street cleaner. And this place is pristine because it's not actually a place where people are on the street. And then the fact that these extras aren't actually citizens doing things, they're pretending, and so they're not very good at it. So all of these little details are phenomenal and really, really well done. That attention to detail is amazing. It's an amazing aspect of this film that rewards repeat viewing, and I think is also just a testament to how good this movie is. I just kind of wanted to just mention that before I jump into the bigger analysis.
Yeah, cool. All right, there's some potatoes. Give me some meat.
So, allegory for high control religion. Because this is something I didn't quite get. And it's an allegory for abusive relationships too. So, in the most generous reading of this, Christof truly does love Truman. I have trouble seeing that because his love is control. He loves Truman as long as Truman does what he wants within the dome.
Yeah, it's
very conditional love. And that love means gaslighting him. It means asking myriad other people to gaslight him. So, thinking about the bus driver who really was upset about it. And, on the one hand, you could be so why does he work for him? And it's well, you're an actor. It's not there's a lot of options out there.
Yeah, jobs are hard
to come by. And if you're an extra on something like that, you don't think you're going to have to actually do that.
Right, like the little girl who was like, is that him?
Yeah. So especially if you're extra and your job is to be the bus driver, you're like, he doesn't leave.
Right, he does, and he doesn't drive the bus. He
Yeah.
doesn't ride the bus.
Yeah.
He has his own car.
Christof does that. And then I saw something last night, and there are several YouTube videos I'm going to link in the show notes that talked about how in a lot of ways, Marlon is a big victim in this too, in part because he was 7 years old when he was brought into this. And Truman is truly his friend, even though he is in on this conspiracy.
Yeah, so he's forced to abuse
his friend.
From 7
age
years
7.
old.
And so he didn't have a chance to consent to this either, which is also really like a good example of what it's like to be in a high control religion.
Right, the indoctrination starts really young, and that's all the internalized oppression, so that even when the big guy's not here, like we police each other.
So there's that societal pressure that Christof, so like the prophet or the narcissist or the abuser, is imposing on others to continue that abuse is so strong that like no one is getting through to Truman, even as he's like asking, like, tell me what's going on. And that is, it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking, especially so Truman doesn't know anyone who is real. And it's fitting that his name is Truman. Everyone else is going by a fake name. And so the other aspect of it, the thing that I have many of the apostates, the ex-evangelicals that I've read have talked about, is they have a touching the wall moment or touching the edge of the dome moment when they have decided to leave their faith, and how it's exhilarating and scary, where they have long suspected that their faith is not what they've been told it was, but they didn't necessarily have proof. And just as Truman has long believed that there is some sort of grand conspiracy, this world is not what he thinks it is, but he didn't necessarily have proof. But when the boat hits the wall and he actually reaches out and his hand's trembling a little bit and he touches the wall, that's proof. It's proof that this world is not what he's been told it is. And how terrifying that is. Christof has this illusion of control. So one of the moments that stuck with me from when I was 19, they are searching for Truman overnight. Like they have all the actors and extras like linking arms. They're searching all of Sea Haven before they realize that he's taken a boat and he's on the sea. It's overnight and he's like, we're not gonna be able to find him. It's too dark. And he's like, cue the sun. It is very clear that Christof sees himself as this god of this little fiefdom.
Yeah, he says he's the creator.
Control is an illusion. Because when Christof is talking to Truman, he says, I know you better than you know yourself. I watched when you were born. I watched when you took your first steps. I watched the episode when you lost your first tooth. And he says it that way, the episode. And Truman says, you never had cameras in my head. And that is, I think, something that's really important is like anytime there is an attempt to control anything, it's an illusion. Because we humans have free will. And the world is chaotic. The attempts to manipulate and control Truman, to imprison him there, can't and won't work because they never had cameras in his head. They never knew who he was inside because it's an illusion of control.
My friend and teacher, Rabbi David Jaffe, says they can hack our brains, but they can't hack our souls. That's what's coming up for me right now.
And watching this, I was reminded very much of The Matrix, which just came out a year later.
Yeah.
Because it's the conversation between Neo and Morpheus where, Neo is saying, like, what is the Matrix? It's like a splinter in your brain, is what Truman is feeling throughout his entire life. There's something wrong with this world. So he gets to leave, and it's Plato's allegory of the cave, which is the only world you've ever known is this cave where you see shadows and you think it's the only world there is. But when you leave the cave and you see the world as it is, it's terrifying because it's different, but it is so much bigger and brighter. I think it is very fitting and shows how much personal, like, the illusion of control, you don't have control over anything but yourself, your soul, that Truman ends the show with his catchphrase and a bow, which is like the most classy middle finger he could possibly give. Be like, you wanted a performer? I'm done performing.
Yeah. Speaking of performers and not, you mentioned that there are those who say that this was sort of prescient of reality TV like Survivor and whatever, but that maybe that misses the point, that comparison misses the point. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. So, like, and I definitely understand why that analysis was so prevalent.
Well, the cameras everywhere is that's the obvious connection.
And I don't think that it's an unreasonable connection. It's just that's not what's disturbing about this film. Like, the fact that he's under constant surveillance is not what's disturbing. A constant and unrealized surveillance.
Yeah.
That his life is a performance is not what's disturbing. What's disturbing...
Well, it's not what's most disturbing.
Oh,
it's kind of disturbing.
Gotcha there. What I took away from this was not the cameras and all of that. It was the gaslighting, the manipulation, Christof's narcissism, the lack of choice, the lack of consent. That is what left me feeling cold about this film. But not, I mean, not cold about this film. The film's brilliant. It's what let me feeling cold about what Christof did. The methodology that Christof used to do it is not good. But this film could have, like the story, he could have done the same thing using a different method. And it would have told a similar story. It just happened to use reality television as the particular medium. And that's why I say I feel like talking about it being prescient about reality TV misses the point. Because this is a story about someone playing God. And it's a story about control that the abusive, controlling person thinks is love. And that, I think, is the point of the story, not the cameras.
Well, I think, too, because the thing that's interesting, not to me, but in general, about reality TV is that all of the players know there are cameras and then forget. And so watching to see when the performance stops, or the performance for the camera stops, and the sort of authenticity or, authentic pettiness for the contest shows up. I don't find that interesting. I like to see people at their best, not at their worst. But I think that's what's interesting to the viewer. But the fact that the players all knew the cameras were there from the beginning is part of the interest, I think. Because seeing when they forget is like what we're watching for. So Truman is the opposite.
Yeah.
Right? Truman never knows the cameras are there. And so the setting is similar insofar as there are cameras everywhere. But the actual action and what is in it for the viewers is different.
Yeah. And I want to make sure I point out that the hypocrisy that Christof displays, he says to Sylvia, your concern is that he could leave anytime he wants and he doesn't. But he can't. Because when he tries to, Christof nearly kills him. And at one point, one of the studio executives says, you can't have him die on live television. And Christof's response is, well, he was born on live television. And because his commitment to the spectacle and the show is greater than his commitment to the well-being of this person he claims to care about. And again, that is, to me, bigger than the fact of the cameras.
And that speaks to something that I don't know if you've said yet, and we're running out of time, but I just want to name, like, we said that the love was conditional, and the condition actually, if we zoom out, is on the money-making ability, right? Like, it's actually all of, like, Truman is a meal ticket for Christof, and he has to keep him in the dome in order to keep that money flowing. And so all those product placements that are so awkward, you know, where Truman's like, who are you talking to? Or like gets pushed against the wall or whatever by acquaintances so that the shot is right. Like those moments, like that's what's driving Christof. And so the condition is not just, it's not just like how you treat me, which is the way sort of narcissistic conditional love often manifests. It's like how you keep making me money.
Well, it's the ultimate stage parent.
Is an extra layer. Yeah.
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 Something to that there as well. So you see all of these people watching, and they are delighted that Truman escapes, even though they are fans of the show, even though they love Truman, even though it means the end of something they enjoy. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, like, some of that has to do with the fact that stories are supposed to end. And, like, one of the things that I lament about American television is that they will squeeze every drop out of it, even long past when the show should have just wrapped up. Same,
but based on the story.
Same with, like, they'll keep churning out sequels, even when, like, the juice is gone.
Right.
I was thinking about that, too, where it's like, that's not even necessarily, like, Truman getting out isn't even exactly about them, like, cheering on this person. It's more about, like, oh, this is a satisfying conclusion.
I think that's part of it. I think there's also potentially some commentary about the authenticity of a parasocial like there is some authentic care even in a parasocial relationship. It's not reciprocal, obviously. But from the audience, like there is genuine care for that person that we're watching on the screen.
Except that the last line is, what else is on?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that speaks to the story. It was a satisfying conclusion. Yeah. Now it's over.
And just that is where, like, the prescience of reality TV, like, everything's a product. And we're just, it's just a constant stream of content.
Yeah, we just consume it and then move on. Yeah. Yeah. We are pretty much out of time. So any, like, final insights before I do my wrap up?
So there's a lot of focus on, like, this is an allegory for high control religion. I was also spending a little time thinking about the aspects of Judaism that I struggle with, specifically the story of the binding of Isaac, where God tells Abraham to take Isaac and sacrifice him. And
really, okay.
Really, you're bringing this up now?
Yeah.
We got 3 minutes left. So I was thinking about that because I struggle with that so much. And that feels like the kind of request that a Christof type God would ask of a Truman type Abraham. And
except it wouldn't be Truman, it would be Marlon.
Yes. Yeah, it would be Marlon of Truman.
Yeah.
And so just thinking about where, and, like, I don't have any answers to it. which is part of the reason why I'm bringing it up at the end, where it's just like, I just want to put this in there and just think about it. But where we can put the ugly aspects of faith traditions when we see echoes in like media like this, where it feels like we're in a dome being asked to do impossible things, horrible things.
I mean, there's a lot of commentary on the Akedah in particular, that story in particular, many of which suggest that God was actually did it so that Abraham would say, no, I'm not doing this. And others that say Abraham was testing God to see if God would actually like go through it with it. And neither of them intended to. But that's a different podcast.
I know. I know. And like the thing is, I don't find either of those satisfying. That's why it reminded me of that. But I was just thinking, like, people who have left high control religions feel like this is a good metaphor for their experience. But I do not feel like I'm a member of a high control religion, but I still see echoes in a religion that I feel very comfortable being a part of. So,
well,
in the stories.
Nobody's asking you to
No one is asking me to bind my child. But what I'm saying is, even in religion that feels pretty progressive and open, there are still stories, there are still moments that can feel like this. And that's worth thinking about. That's all I'm saying.
I'm going to give some highlights from some key takeaways from what we just talked about. Okay. So I'll start with where we ended, which is that this film is an allegory that ex-evangelical, so people who have escaped high control evangelical religions, see themselves in this movie, in the way, the control that is exerted over Truman. And you're noting that even in non-high control religions, like the sort of non-Orthodox Judaism that you and I practice, there are echoes, at least in the stories, if not in what we're being asked to do. And that's worth thinking about, that this movie as an allegory of religion and escape from religion. And the implications of that with the narcissism of Christof, who is the creator of the TV show, are sort of interesting in terms of like some of those stories, and then also the actual churches where a leader is narcissistic. And then you pointed out, this is really interesting, the ways in which the gaslighting that is required of this control, of the object of control, the gaslighting of them and the participation in the gaslighting of everyone around them and the damage that that does to other people. You spent some time pointing out in particular the damage, the victimhood of Marlon, the best friend, who was recruited into this when he was 7 years old. So literally grew up lying to his friend. And that's the basis of their relationship and the only relationship that they have, and how just sad and damaging that is. You noted that this sort of escape metaphor is reminiscent of Plato's allegory of the cave, and that if all you know is the cave and the shadows on the cave, then you think that's all there is. And then you actually go outside, and it is wonderful and terrifying when you see how much bigger and brighter and more depth there is to the world outside the cave. You also talked about there's a lot about control in this movie. And so you noted that all control in this movie and otherwise is an illusion, because in the pithy quote of my teacher and friend, Rabbi Jaffe, they can hack our brains, but they can't hack our souls. So Christof thinks he knows Truman better than Truman knows himself, but there are no cameras in Truman's head. And so when Truman starts to think for himself, things change. We talked a little bit about capitalism in this film and sort of the nods to capitalism with the product placements, but also the fact that Christof's love of Truman is completely conditional, and not just conditional on the way that Truman treats Christof, which is sort of a traditional narcissistic conditional love, but conditional on him continuing to be the cash cow of the star of this TV show. Many people call this film prescient of later reality TV, which in some ways it is, because the setting is very similar with cameras everywhere, including in your bathroom mirror. But the actual heart, the meat of what's happening, of the lessons that we are meant to draw is totally different because reality TV stars know the cameras are there. And sometimes they forget, but they know from the beginning that they're there and they consent to do this. And Truman did not. And so the actual lessons that we're learning are different. And then the last thing, which was the first thing you started with, was the remarkable attention to detail that the filmmakers had for this film. So the example you gave was he's in a geodesic dome without actual sunlight. So they put vitamin D next to him that repeat viewing will reveal various things like that are attention to detail, like the actress who has to come in and still has the makeup bib on, or other things that remind us that all of this is a fiction inside a fiction because we're watching a movie. Any final words?
Just that I think that this movie gets to a human condition, even though it's about something completely fantastical.
Yeah. Nice. Well, next week, I am going to bring you my deep thoughts about Romancing the Stone, thanks to a listener suggestion. So thanks,
Very
Amy.
cool. See you then.
This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes.
Thank you to Resonate Recordings for editing today's episode.
Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?